Okay, you are all set.
Okay, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Finance and Claims Committee meeting of the Norwalk Common Council for today, Thursday, September 8th, 2022, beginning at 7:03 p.m. We'll begin with the roll call of the council members on the Finance Claims Committee, starting with Council Member David Hooverman.
Present.
Council Member Brian Meeks. He is present. Council Member Jen McMurray.
Present.
Thank you. Council Member Nora Najelski-Eichner.
Present.
Council Member John Kides.
Here.
Council Member Diana Revolus is not available, and myself, Greg Burnett. So we have a quorum. Thank you. Moving on to item 3 in the agenda that was sent out electronically, public participation. We did not receive any emails to be read at this particular meeting. Do we have any attendees waiting to speak? I don't see any attendees in the waiting room. So does any council member have any item that they received that they wish to share during public participation? Okay, hearing and seeing none at this time, we'll close public participation and move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is approval of the minutes of the following Finance Claims Committee meeting. And if you could correct your agenda to change the date from July 14th, 2022 to the correct date should be August 11th, 2022. The minutes were sent out along with the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from August 11th, 2022? Councilmember David Hooverman, thank you. Do we have any additions, deletions, or changes? Okay, hearing and seeing none. All those in favor of the approval of the minutes as presented, show by either raising your hand or verbal aye. So we have Councilmember David Hooverman and Greg Burnett and Nora Najelski-Eichner. Although any opposed and any abstentions?
Abstain.
I see 2 abstentions, Brian Meeks and Jen McMurray. Thank you. Moving on to items 5, 6, and 7 on the agenda, which is the Claims Committee report for September 2022, the narrative on the tax collection dated September 2022, and the monthly tax collectors report dated August of 2022. And we have Lisa Biagirelli, our tax collector, to cover those 3 items. So over to you, Lisa B.
Thank you, Chairman Burnett. Can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear.
Perfect. Good evening, folks. Unfortunately, I do not have spreadsheets for August, but I do have figures for you that I put in the narrative form. We're a little shorthanded in the office, but we did close our month out and our current collection percentage is up to 52.78% of our adjusted levy, which is up from 43.95 as of the end of July. We're running very slightly ahead of where we were last year at this time. We're slightly behind with regard to sewer use and the IPP industrial pretreatment program, but nonetheless still at 49.18% of the sewer levy and 68% of the IPP fee. I'll have a more complete picture of the prior fiscal year once we complete those spreadsheets. But we are now in the process of sending out past due notices. And I just wanted to draw your attention to that because some of you may receive telephone calls or contact from your constituents our past due notices take the form of what is called a demand for payment. It's a statutory term. It's not meant to imply rudeness to the taxpayer, but we are required to make demand before we pursue any other collection enforcement. So as an efficiency measure, when we send out delinquent notices, we include demand language on those notices. Those are at the printer now. They're going out in the mail most likely next week. They will bear interest as of September. We did have a situation this past collection period where a number of taxpayers were the victims of what appears to be a type of fraud where their checks in payment were taken out of the mail stream and never reached us. They were negotiated because of remote processing now. The payee was changed, and in many cases, the amount was changed, and they were basically cashed by fraudsters, not by the city. We will find out if there are more of those when those individuals get a delinquent notice, a demand notice from us, because we have not received their payment and they may not be aware of it yet. If they don't check their bank statement and see where that check was negotiated, there are potentially taxpayers who are not yet aware that this has happened to them. I wanted to bring it to your attention before it occurs, just so that you are aware. The other thing that we are doing right now is there's going to be a levy notice in the newspaper next week for business personal property enforcement. As you're aware, this is a non-tax sale year. Our next tax sale will be in 2023. So in 2022, we are pursuing business personal property. A number of our accounts have been turned over to state marshals for collection, and we're putting a levy notice in the paper to potentially notify other creditors and to try to draw the attention of those who do owe these funds. So I'm glad to answer any questions that you may have, and I'm sorry I don't have the spreadsheets for you, but as soon as I do, I will send them out.
One question, Lisa. Item 5 on the agenda,
Oh,
the
the
Claims
claims.
Committee report. I know we, in reviewing the list, we did not have any claims over 10,000. So just want to confirm there's nothing for us to approve. On
I
the Claims Committee.
apologize. Yes, that's my oversight. There are no special requests this month. So the claims are for your informational purposes only. All of those refunds have already been processed, and I skipped right over it myself. I apologize.
No problem.
Thank you.
Two quick questions on the narrative. I know we're allowed to continue to include in the prior fiscal year up to the end of August. And I know the narrative indicated as of the end of July. Do we know where we're at as of the end of August or not yet?
Not yet.
Okay, no problem. But it's going to be north of 99.3%, correct?
I hope so.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Great. And my final question, when you talked about that fraud, that's concerning. Do we know the magnitude of how many of those checks that were mailed in were misdirected or intercepted?
As of right now, we've spoken with 3 or 4 customers. Other towns are facing the same thing, so it's not unique to Norwalk. Some of the checks were mailed actually at the Darien post office, and the Darien tax office is reporting the same problem. But I suspect that we will hear from more people once the delinquent notices go out. But we were contacted directly by, I think it was 4 so far this collection period. This has happened in the past, that the fraudsters go into the mailbox with something sticky and they pull out the envelopes, whatever they can get, and whatever checks they find, they wash them. They strip the print the ink off them and they write in what they want. And the check is so visibly altered. If an individual person were looking at it, they would probably notice it, but a lot of these deposits are done remotely and it's done by computer and nobody is picking up on it. And it's very unfortunate because in some cases, an individual would send a check in for maybe $300 or $400 in taxes, and the fraudster will write the check for $8,000, and in one case it was cashed. And their account was cleaned out.
Very unfortunate.
Yes.
And any suggestions how to avoid this?
Yes. Our suggestion how to avoid it is to, if you're going to mail your check, which is, a very common method of paying taxes, mail it early and then check to make sure that your check has cleared your bank and make sure it's cleared with us and not somebody else. So that's exactly how the individuals who did discover it, that's what they did. And they realized right away, I didn't write a check for $8,000 to whoever it was, John Smith, who cashed their check. If you don't want to mail your check at all, there's other methods that you can use to pay, including the one we recommend now, which is the electronic check, the e-check. You can write an electronic check online for the cost of, I believe, $1.50, slightly more than mailing it, but possibly worth it.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions of the tax collector? Yes, Councilmember Hoofman and Councilmember Meeks.
Thank you, Chairman Burnett. Nothing major, not a big question. Just wondering, you mentioned you're being shorthanded right now. Is this vacations and things, or we're not going into another COVID issue, are we?
I have one individual who is out with COVID right now. I had it earlier this year, but I've recovered, and we have 2 vacancies that we do hope to fill within, I would say, the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Councilmember Meeks.
Oh, hi. I was just going to say, use one of the secure USPS mailboxes where you can only slide the letter in through the slot, because they were even fishing them out, like where you had the old pail system where it went back and forth. They were fishing them out of here over in Cranberry out of that. And then USPS replaced it with where you can only put a letter in. It'd be very hard to pull something back out.
Yes.
But people leaving them in on the curbs are subject to these feeds. It's terrible.
They did replace the mailbox at City Hall with the kind that you're mentioning, with just the small slit. But I know that there are others out there. It's unfortunate. But it's also happening to other creditors and other municipalities as well.
Any other questions of the tax collector? Okay, great. Lisa, thank you so much for your update. We look forward to next month getting the August data and closing out the fiscal year. Again, north of 99.3%. And thank you for all the hard work that you do. We truly appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Moving on in the agenda, item 8 is a report of the Tax Assessor's Office, the Elderly Homeowner Senior Tax Relief Program. And we have Bill Ford, our tax assessor, on the call to take us through the senior elderly relief program.
Good evening, everyone. So, little refresher, there are 2 forms of credits. There is a state EHO and there's a local option that the council has approved. The council, in addition to approving the local option, increased the income limits. So the state, hold on one second.
Would it be helpful for me to share the
That's, I was just
email?
going down my, yeah, that we could do that. So the maximum income for state benefits is $46,400. The city has a 2-tier system. We have a $1,500 and we have a $900. For the $1,500, the limit is $58,700. For the $900 credit, the income limit is $72,300. The total local participants was 1,199 in the past year. The total state participants was 766. So if you scroll down a little further, sir, we have average tax credits of 1,343, and the total state benefits were 460,065. I took a look this time. The chairman in the committee in prior years has asked about, is it time to increase the income limits for the local option again? Looking at the quartiles of those that applied, this is all that applied, not all that qualified. So we have a couple at the maximum where it says 88,796 in the fourth quartile. Those exceeded the limit and did not receive the benefits. There were very few that exceeded the benefit. There were very few applicants that exceeded the income limit. There were people that received the benefits in the past, but due to changes, received additional income in the current cycle. Looking at the averages of the quartiles, the maximum being 57,597. We currently have our limit almost 20,000 over that number. So it doesn't appear that we need to increase at this time. This is not a voting time. This is just an advisory report of what happened in the EHO this year. So total tax relief for the elderly for local was 1.556 million this year. So we have a number of our residents that are benefiting from this elderly homeowner option. This is an informational report. If there's any questions, I could take them now.
Yes, Councilmember Hooverman and Councilmember Nora Najelski-Eichner.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Burnett. Bill, question, these are tax credits. Do we also do any deferral of tax credits?
There's a deferral
Of
program.
tax credit?
There's a separate deferral program. We have this year, I believe, 5 individuals on the deferral program.
And what are how does that program work? I know that the limits on this are here. What qualifies for the deferral?
Hold on one second. Let me pull that out. My experience in the past for deferral programs is the taxpayers do not like a deferral program. The majority of them want the house. They look at it as a lien on the house. And now that their houses are free and clear, they try to stay away from the deferral program. So give me 1 second. System is a little slow. So the income limit for unmarried or married is $71,300 for the deferral program. Market value of their property shall not exceed $915,000 as well. The deferral is limited to the lesser of either $4,500 or 50% of the principal tax due.
And if you qualify for a single year deferral, does that exempt you from a following year?
I'm sorry, if you qualify for 1 year.
Yeah.
So you do not have to continue. If there's one particular year you decided, okay, I'm going to defer this year, the following years you could
You could apply again
the taxes.
also?
You can also pay a portion of the taxes. You don't have to defer all of it. So if you have the ability to pay half of the tax and want to defer 50%, you have the right to do that as well now. That was actually a decision by the courts not too long ago, about 2 years ago.
All right.
I will say again, the deferred amount is recorded in the land records and it constitutes a lien on the property. So that's what usually defers. it creates a situation where the people prefer not to participate.
Okay, thank you.
Council member Nora Nadjelski Eichner.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Ford, a number of questions. So first, I just want to make sure that I am correct. We are offering the maximum allowable credit at this time. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
We offer the maximum credit. We could increase the income.
Right. We could increase the income to which it applies, but we cannot increase the amount of the credit any further than this.
Correct.
Okay. Do you have any sense of where this credit amount is in comparison to what other states offer their elderly homeowners?
I could get that for you. Having worked in New York and Massachusetts,
Yep.
The interesting thing is, so New York, the percentage, the credit, if you want to call it, is higher, but the income is much lower.
Mm-hmm.
So that's they're creating a situation where the extremely limited income people are receiving a greater benefit.
Okay.
Massachusetts, it's similar. The income limits are a little lower, and the benefit is about the same as our total benefit when you have state and local.
Interesting. And for most of the homeowners who qualify, what percentage of their tax due does this credit take care of?
I would have to check that. I do not know the percentage of the tax. I don't know the percentage of the credit and the tax due. I can
Yeah,
we can
I
add
think-
that to the reports for going forward, or I can do a supplemental.
I think that would be extremely helpful to understand because at the end of the day, the absolute amount matters, but it also is helpful for us in terms of understanding the impact of tax increases in the budget to understand whether these residents are therefore incurring an additional $200 or whether, it's actually a much more substantial portion of their income that is not being credited back to them. So that would be very helpful. I would appreciate that. And then
Let me also say, if anything comes up like that you would like some information on, let us know. We can include it in reports.
okay, terrific. No, I definitely will do that. And then with this, so I'm noticing, for instance, that 58 homeowners sold their residences out of 140 applicants, which is a pretty large percentage. Is that typical, or is that a typical amount of turnover?
That is, in my humble opinion, due to COVID. The increase in real estate values, we saw a number of transactions at numbers that were not anticipated. And it's, I call it, I think it's Redfin or one of the Zillow, one of them has a make me move price.
Yes.
So if your house is worth $500,000 for $1.2 million, I will move.
Sure.
And what I believe happened due to COVID and the increase in values in the area, it hit their make me move price.
Mm-hmm. And that makes sense. I did want to double check. So this is an anomaly to have that many elderly homeowners leaving in a year. Okay. Do you get feedback? I know this may or may not happen, but do you have a sense of, for homeowners in this qualifying income bracket, or in the bracket sort of slightly above, do you all get feedback that the property taxes are a factor in their decision to sell?
We have not received any feedback on that, no.
Right. And I don't know that anyone would necessarily comment to you, but I was curious if that was a sort of a complaint that has come to your office. So that's helpful to understand. And then I know that this is going beyond the scope of tonight's report, but as I understand it, there are similar programs for disabled, for veterans. Are folks able to stack their credits? So if you're an elderly disabled veteran, can you stack the credits, or is this a sort of you choose which program is most advantageous?
So the interesting thing in Connecticut, so you brought up other states, in New York, it has to be, all owners have to be over 65. So a brother and sister living in the same residence can be over 65. In Connecticut, if the one owner is qualified, they can get their 50%. If they're 50% ownership in the property, they can get their, whatever exemption they qualify for, they can get the 50% of the exemption. So if you qualify for 1,500, you get your $750 off. So you could have multiple individuals in a property receiving different exemptions.
Okay. And they're applied to whatever percentage of the house they own. Interesting. Okay, that's helpful to understand. And then finally, just with the sort of number of applicants you're getting here, again, how much advertising are you doing to make sure that people are aware of this? What is the process for people understanding that they qualify this? Do you notify people who might be eligible?
There's no way for me to know their age to advise people. I can't do a mailing to people I think are over 65 years of age. But through the senior center and every accountant, I believe, when their clients hit 65, if their income qualifies, they advise them as well. That's quite often how a lot of the people come to find out about it. We're told, my accountant told me I should come and file for this.
Interesting. Okay. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate the information, and I certainly would appreciate feedback in the future in terms of the amount of people's property tax burden that we're able to alleviate through these credits. I think would be helpful to understand.
We can add that, and we could add veterans to the report as well.
That would be terrific. I would really, I think, the more, it's very helpful to be able to offer this benefit to people in our city. I mean, as we all know, there's a lot of pressure on affordability right now with the COVID rages. And so I think the more we can understand what we are offering and try to figure out how we can do better for people, it's really helpful to understand where we're starting. So thank you. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you,
Hey,
ma'am.
Councilmember Brian Meek.
Yeah, thanks. I'd just like to echo Nora's sentiments. The VA data should be included in here. I also, maybe I misheard you, but you said that it's mean tested based on the actual assessed value of the home. Is that correct?
So not for the elderly program, but for the deferral program. The deferral
okay.
program has a value limit of $915,000.
Okay, thank you. And
So if you're living in a $5 million house, you can't defer your taxes.
Okay, and I would just like to just add to the conversation as a practitioner that Norwalk is very, very generous with this program with respect to the state. I can't speak to other states. But that said, we're nowhere near as generous as some of our surrounding towns, which are some of these discounts are fire sales, literally. But it would be nice to be able to afford to get to that. I guess my question would be: do we look at, Westport is fantastic for their seniors, and it would be nice to get to a point like that with Norwalk. Do we look at the surrounding towns when we consider where we're going to set this level of income? Thank you.
We don't look at surrounding towns when we set the level of income. Again, the level income in Westport, if you look at the numbers compared to Norwalk, are significantly different. The median household incomes, et cetera, vary. They're much higher than the city of Norwalk income levels. So they probably did it similar to us on a percentage of the median income or a multiple of that.
Thanks. I mean, I routinely see as a practitioner near 80% discounts on what it would be at market. And, we're okay here, right? Like an average tax bill is about 7,000 or 8,000. So if we give you 1,500, it's about 20%. It helps a lot. But it's not as competitive as Westport, for example.
I will review the Westport elderly program. There are a number of programs in different jurisdictions, and they're usually tied to the median incomes of the various areas. So I don't know what Westport's dollar amount, their income limit is, and I don't know what their benefit is, but I will check it.
Thank you.
Great. Lisa, I see you have your hand up.
I just wanted to add that there is a state statute on point that requires a taxpayer to pay at least 25% of their tax bill. Not all towns follow this. And I won't say any by name, but we in Norwalk endeavor to follow our state statutes to the letter. And every taxpayer that is on the program is required to pay at least 25% of their tax bill. That also includes taxpayers who are on the deferral program. So the maximum amount that a taxpayer could defer is 75% of their bill. They can switch, as William explained. They can apply for the deferral 1 year and apply for credits the other. They can stack their credits. They can stack the state program on top of the local program. And William's office does their best to endeavor to give every taxpayer the maximum amount of credit to which they are entitled and to try to get the word out there. We've done mailings in the past in conjunction with our tax billing to try to get the word out. We have a pamphlet that we pass out to people so that anybody who knows an elderly or disabled person who may qualify, they're encouraged to apply.
And the pamphlet is available also at the senior center and other areas.
Great. Thank you, Lisa, for that input. Do we have any other questions or comments? And Bill, you mentioned that, so this report, as you mentioned, is for informational purposes only. So we're not looking for an increase in the threshold. I believe the last time we increased the threshold, the number of participants increased from like 1104 to like 1157, and I see now we're at 1199. So obviously we're getting more participants in the program at the current level. So we'll look to see where we're at next year at this time, if we choose to increase the threshold to have more participants. So thank you for that information. Councilmember Nora Nadelsky-Eichner.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. Since I wasn't here when the last raise was done, was that initiated by this committee? Was that initiated by the tax assessor's office? I mean, given the, effects of inflation, it does seem like something we may potentially want to consider, as part of kind of a relief package for folks who may be struggling. So is that something that comes out of our committee, or how do we?
The recommendation comes from the tax assessor's office, and it's reviewed at this committee, the Finance and Claims Committee. We review the requests and the data that supports the increase, and then we make the recommendation to the full council to improve the income threshold and benefit levels.
Great. That's helpful to know. So, Mr. Ford, again, I would certainly be interested in whether, there is some assessment of greater need here. It's been a difficult time economically for a lot of folks. And quite frankly, as a percentage of the city budget, 1.5 million in tax relief is not that demanding. So something certainly to consider for your consideration, as we're preparing the budget for this year. I certainly would be supportive of seeing a potential increase there.
Understood. While we were discussing, answering the questions, I came up with some other things that we can add to the report for next year. And that is, if I can get some idea of the total number of homeowners that are 65 plus. I'm trying to figure out a way to do that. And tying the numbers back to, like I said, the median household income and things like that. We can add that to the report as well.
Yes, I think that'd be really helpful to understand. I mean, again, I think we're very eager, all of us on this committee are very eager to figure out, are we meeting the needs of our community here? And, this information is certainly helpful for that. But as you say, having a better sense of, what percentage of the people who might be in need of this assistance we're really reaching, and whether there is, some additional work we could do to reach more folks who might be teetering on the edge there, and for whom this relief might really help them stay in the city, which is obviously a priority.
We can
Okay.
take it with that additional information.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Meeks? You're muted.
Thank you, Chairman. Since we're going on in this topic, I would like to see the instructions expanded, and look, you're doing a great job with, like, this is all over the senior center. Everybody knows about this, who goes there, you know. So apart from shut-ins, I think the community's pretty well informed about the benefits. I find the application process a little tedious. A lot of people own rental properties. They're not aware that like depreciation is an add back on income. You know, a lot of times too, they're seniors I run into who don't even need to file income tax returns for IRS purposes, are kind of put off by the process because they feel like they need to have a tax return to go into your office and apply for this. And, you know, my position has always been, well, if you're not legally required to by Treasury, the city can't require you to file something you're not legally required to file. You're definitely qualified for the income. A lot of them end up just paying me to do tax returns because they find it easier to deal with your department when they have one. So I would like to see the instructions expanded upon to tell them what is included in gross income and not, and also when they don't need to have a tax return. I think it could be a little more friendly like that. And I'm not trying to talk myself out of work, but they're really simple returns, but in some cases they just don't even need to do them. Thanks.
So again, if they're not required to do a return, then they can bring us all the information that they would typically bring to an accountant, and we can review that information. They're advised of that when they come in or call or say, how do I qualify for this? And in the discussion, if the person advises that they don't file a tax return, they're advised to bring in all of their income information, all your 1099s with interest, et cetera, any income that you receive, Social Security, you receive an annual form from them. We walk them through that as much as possible.
I would just say it would be friendlier if the instruction sheet included that information.
We will look into it, sir.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Bill, thank you for the update and so some recommendations that were made. So we'll move forward from this point. Moving on to item 9 in the agenda, which is receive the Oak Hills Authority monthly financial statements for July 2022. And we have Joe Androsco, who is the chairperson for the Oak Hills Park Authority. Hello, Joe.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'll just launch into it. For the July 22, the first month of the fiscal year, we did fairly well. Rounds exceeded budget, and cart rentals and ID cards also did. A lot of this is due to weather, but also demand has been high. We've got good outings planned for September and October, which is always good for revenue, especially in those months. So looking good for the first half of the fiscal year, leading into the winter. For financial highlights, over budget on net operating income with a really strong cash position, about $50K higher on our cash position than we expected to be just 1 month in, and that's really due to those rounds being high. Helped by also expenses being lower, but not for a particularly good reason. It's been very hard to find people to hire at the wages that we've set. And so, we're coming in a little bit lower on staffing budget, especially seasonal staffing, because of that. But the team is making do with the lower staffing and getting all the work done. And, the response, the comments that we're getting on the actual conditions of the course are great, even though we're understaffed. And then we made our payments to the city, our repayments at the higher rate for the first time. We pay now $2.10 per round back to the city as part of a amended loan repayment plan. And we also pay 1% of previous year's audited golf revenue every year. So our audit is currently going on of the FY22 year. And once we've got that finalized and, you know, we know what the final golf revenue is, we will pay 1% of that in a lump sum back to the city. So, you know, one month into the fiscal year, with a little bit of insight into how things are going in September and October for outings and knowledge about what August did. But, you know, those financials will take a little bit of time to settle down. But August was also very strong. It's looking like, you know, cash position is going to continue to grow. We'll draw that down during the winter time when we're not getting revenue, but we still have especially personnel expenses. And also we'll draw that down as we go into our capital improvement plans, a couple of projects that we have planned just to, you know, work on some of the physical assets that we have. But we don't expect to need to dip into our line of credit to be able to make it through the winter this year, which is the second year in a row we've been able to do that. And it's just a great position to be in, to not have to borrow at 5, 6, 7% just to make payroll during the winter is a much better position than we've been in many, many years prior. So that's pretty much the long and the short of it for the new fiscal year so far. I'm happy to take any questions. I do not, many questions that get into deep detail on the balance sheet items or even on individual expense revenue line items. I may need to take back and defer to our financial guru, the controller. But, you know, anything that I do know, I'm happy to answer.
Joe, during the last month's meeting, the vice chair, we had a discussion about some of the issues that are taking place at the restaurant. Do you have any update on the restaurant situation?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that we've talked about at the restaurant are offering breakfast service and really catering to golfers so that, you know, people are able to have some trust in that product. And that it's going to be there when they come off the course and that it's going to be there before they go on the course, right? It's a very natural flow to check in and then say, oh, I'm kind of hungry, I'd like to go get something. So I think those are two things that we have been working with the licensee on. I know that the happy hour and golfers menu has been delivered on. They've been publicizing that. The breakfast, I think, is still a work in progress. We're really trying to get this end of season as the testing ground for some of those things so that we can come back in April and, you know, hit the ground running, you know, with the lessons that we've learned late in this season. But my urging for the licensee is really develop a trust relationship with the golfers, because most restaurants would just love to have 50,000 stomachs walking through the building every year, which is effectively what we have with 50,000 rounds being played. You know, if those 50,000 stomachs trust and believe that that product is going to be there and it's going to be something that they want day in, day out when they're playing, they'll go. Right now, they're not planning to go because they're not sure if it's going to be open. And that's, I think, really shooting us in the foot on the food and beverage service. So constant improvement, but not quite there yet, to be honest.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Meeks.
Yeah, hi, just 3 quick comments. I'm really pleased with the progress of Oak Hills, personally, as a consumer and a resident. 2, I want to give special thanks to Mark, your controller, who transactions and journal entries that go on into preparing the financials. And three, I think you need to make a harder, let's say a harder stance position on your cash flow, which is fantastic. I think too often a lot of detractors of this golf course get bogged down into the bottom line and don't really look at it in terms of cash flow, and they're discounting the $100,000 a year we're writing off on depreciation expense for the building alone, the restaurant alone, that is. So please make a stronger position on the cash flow to get some of these naysayers out of our hair. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Oak Hills? Okay, hearing, seeing none. Thank you, Joe, for the update, and we'll look forward to next month seeing how the summer finished out.
Great. Thanks so much. Good night.
Great, thank you. Moving on in the agenda to item 10, which has two parts, and we'll take each of them separately. Item 10A reads as follows: resolution requesting a special capital appropriation in the amount of $200,000 to increase the appropriation to fund the police cars and van replacement account, as noted, to purchase 3 new vehicles. This capital appropriation shall be funded through a reallocation of $200,000 of authorized but unissued general obligation bonds or notes of the city from project number as noted, Police Communication Council. The $200,000 of bonds or notes of the city shall be issued in accordance with the provisions and terms set forth in the original bond resolutions that authorize the issuance of bonds or notes of the city for project number as noted, the Police Communications Council. Do we have a motion on this item? Councilmember Jen McMurray, thank you. And we have on the call with us today, Mickey Dosimo, as well as Deputy Chief Sue Zecker, to talk to this item. And I believe, Henry, you have some input on this also, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Burnett. The background is very simple. I believe the number was $13 million that negotiated to spend over 2 fiscal years to upgrade the police communication system. I like to refer to what Deputy Chief Zecca informed me, that program capital project took us from analog to digital, and it was critical to get done. We issued the bonds for that project. The project was managed and there were surplus funds. We came in under budget, and the police department would like to shift 200,000 of those funds that are not necessary for that original capital project to their vehicle line item for these 3 vehicles. The finance department is supportive of this motion, and I'll let Mickey and Deputy Chief Zecca address it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Director Dakowitz pretty much covered it. I'll let him handle the bond portion of it. Basically, this is for a citywide communications upgrade. There was $13.5 million to start. It does look like there'll be ample funds to reallocate the $200,000 for 3 vehicles that were in our original replacement plan. Each of them are in excess of $85,000. They didn't survive the budget process, so this is a way to acquire the vehicles without any further levy on the city. We think it's a solid request. Like I said, we're confident that there's ample funds. I don't have an exact number yet, but I'm in constant touch with Tom Ellis and Director Dakowitz, and as that picture becomes clearer, I'll let them know exactly what the numbers are. That's all I have.
The only thing that I would mention is that the communications project is still ongoing. We're in the midst of it. We have numbers on a lot of it, but it is a project that's still going to be ongoing for probably another year before we're finished with it, but we're very confident that we have this money left in the budget.
Thank you. I know the backup information indicated that as of July 25th, there was 8.2 million remaining in the account, which I guess that works out to about 40% has been used so far. We're confident that we're not going to overrun the 13.5, correct?
Yes.
We're
Okay.
very
Very
confident.
that
I made a
we'll-
run today. The number as of today is $7,632,242. So we're very confident that we will
Okay.
have in
Good.
excess of the 200,000.
Great, great. Well, this is great. Just, I'm elated to hear this. I advocated during the capital budget process to add in the additional dollars for the vehicles, and unfortunately, we could not make that work. So at least I'm personally supportive of this, that we found a way to make this happen for facilities that are definitely needed. So thank you for finding a way to make this happen. Councilmember Cotties, you had your hand up?
Actually, Mr. Burnett, you answered my question. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Nora Jelski-Eichner.
Thank you so much, Chair. So I know that I'm a broken record on this, but I see that it also came up in the planning and zoning review of this. It is really time to make the transition to electric. And I personally have been opposed to purchasing new vehicles until we can undertake the sort of necessary infrastructure or comprehensive plan to transition to fully electric. So I appreciate that we are, managing to do this within the existing capital budget. We're not, doing an increase for it. But I urge, everyone involved here to, to really undertake the planning necessary to put the infrastructure in place, to come back to us with a capital request that is for the, the electric charging infrastructure and the fleet transition, rather than us sort of continuing to invest money in, in gas vehicles. Are the 3 vehicles that are being purchased going to be hybrids, at least?
No, they are not. They're gas vehicles. That's what's available right now. As I think many of you know, vehicles are very hard to come by right now. And there's extreme delay in shipments of even what was previously ordered. So these will be gas.
Okay. And are you anticipating having funds left over from the communication console in excess of this 200,000?
Yes.
Okay. And so those funds will return to the capital budget, or are there other?
They're expected.
They're-
We expect to have some funds to be able to return. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the information.
Great. Are any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing or hearing none, I'll call for the vote now. All those in favor of the approval of this resolution, show by a raise of hand or a verbal aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed have the same right. We have one opposed, Nora Nadelski-Eichner. Any abstentions? The motion passes. Thank you. This item will move forward to the next council meeting for final approval on Tuesday, September 13th. So we'll bring it forward next week.
Thank you all very much for hearing this item.
Great, great. And just as a side note, and this is directed to our CFO, as we go into the capital budget cycle, and not trying to highlight it at all, this particular situation, but, we appropriated 13.5. We haven't used all of it yet. So a general question, do we have other line items in the capital budget where we've obligated a certain amount, but we're not going to use the total amount obligated. So there is, for lack of a better word, surplus. Is it possible that we can get that capital line item review either by the October or November meeting so we understand all of our capital projects and what type of where do we stand as it relates to what we committed and what we've actually spent?
Usually, that information is only known at the end of a project. When you're in the middle of a project, you don't know whether you're going to be over budget, under budget, how much of a surplus. What happens is at the end of a project, when the expenses are well known and there may be only a certain small number remaining, it can then be calculated how much can be returned to our unexpended bond proceeds fund. The Board of Ed has done this on numerous occasions. When they had projects with excess funds, they generally close out those projects and request that those funds that were unexpended get transferred to another Board of Ed project. It doesn't happen as often on the city side, but we have a methodology that we work with the project managers as we come to a close of a project. So it's not like we're sitting here with a list of projects with an estimated surplus. Usually it's project by project as they get to the real conclusion. And I would just caution everyone, with the inflation that has kicked up over the last 12 to 15 months, if anything, it may go the other way, where capital projects require additional funding because the estimates, which might have been made 2 years ago, then we borrow the money, then they start spending, then they get increases. It might go the other way. So we're on standby. We borrow the funds, we have it available for the expenditures. We do cash flow estimates every quarter to figure out how much we're going to need, the project managers will need to expend. And at the same time, we update our estimates of revenue, mostly state reimbursements of costs. So we're watching it carefully, and then we make our decisions, especially how much to raise once a year for the summer borrowing.
Let me pose my question a slightly different way. Do we have closed out projects that have come in under the amount that we initially appropriated, where we have a difference? And not something to answer now, but if we do, could we get a report of what those projects look like and how much under did they come in at?
Oh, for sure. I'm sure Chitsime and her team could calculate and develop a list of that, maybe over the past year, that sort of thing.
That would be great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on to item B under the same resolution reads as follows. Resolution deauthorizing the amount of $200,000 of authorized but unissued bonds from the Police Communication Council account as account number noted to purchase the 3 vehicles for the police department. Do we have a motion on this item? Councilmember Jen McMurray, thank you. Any comments or questions related to this resolution? Okay, hearing seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor show by the sign of aye, verbally or raising your hand.
Aye.
All those opposed have the same right. Any abstentions? Nora, I don't think we captured your vote.
I mean, I recognize the inconsistency, but if the 200,000 is being removed, then, I'm certainly, my vote is, I don't think there's any reason to vote against removing the 200,000, despite my vote against using it specifically for cars when I think we should transition to electric.
Okay, so your vote is in the affirmative, correct? All right, so so it's unanimous. So this item also will move forward to the council meeting on Tuesday, September 13th for full council approval. Thank you. Moving on to item 11, which reads as follows: authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into contract with Vision Government Solutions for a revaluation of residential properties in the amount not to exceed $900,000, account number noted, the tax assessor reevaluation, other professional services account. Do we have a motion on this item? Councilmember Nora Nadjelski Eichner, thank you. And our tax assessor, Bill Ford, will lead us in this discussion.
Welcome back. So as you're all aware, every 5 years, the city must perform a revaluation per state codes. We did an RFP. The results were reviewed. We interviewed candidates, and the committee made a determination that we would split the residential and the commercial between two different companies. And we have Patrick Donovan here from Vision Government Solutions, who we have selected as the residential component for $900,000. This was a topic that the chairman brought up and asked about the revaluation at one of the previous meetings not too long ago, and we told him we'd be back shortly. So we are here for the approvals to move the project forward.
Great. A quick question. So this is a change from the previous service that we used for the last reval. Is that correct?
It is a different firm, yes.
Okay.
Patrick, maybe you want to describe a little bit about your firm and the proposal that you made and the selection for the services.
Sure, I would be happy to. Again, my name is Patrick Donovan from Vision Government Solutions. We are actually your provider of your CAMA system for the city, currently in the assessor's office to do the valuation work. We have been a provider of both revaluation and CAMA services since the mid-1970s. We have a great staff that is local to Connecticut with a lot of experience. In particular, our management team of June Perry and Gary Fields bring well over 70 years of revaluation experience combined. So I think you've got a great team that'll be led by those two to do a very, it's a very large project in a short period of time. But I think you've got some good leaders that I can't speak highly enough about that have been doing this for quite a long time to lead that charge. Hope that answers a little bit about us.
I will add a little bit, if I might. Obviously, we do revals every 5 years, and there were concerns about the last reval simply because it went up 16%, which was a recovery from the prior reval, which was through the recession and the valuations of real estate that had gone down. There were areas of concern that we specifically addressed in the RFP, and the responders had to talk about them. One of which was improved communications, both with legislators, but more importantly with the taxpayers. What are we doing? How are we doing this? What is the aspect of the reval? And how do we get numbers? There are trends that will affect all the revaluations in the city. One trend is that residential prices have gone up because of the bidding, because of the migration of people from New York, Boston, and elsewhere to Norwalk. Another aspect is that on the commercial side, we're doing better than other cities, which have seen those valuations collapse. If Bill has trained me well, I think we are holding our own, because although there's a loss of some demand for commercial space, That is offset by companies who say, I want to get a smaller space so that my employees who live in Norwalk and can work from home will have a place away from their personal residence where they can work for us. So there will be a shift. The valuations will increase on the residential side. And we are committed to having a communications package, whether it's leaflets and information sessions with PowerPoint presentations, so that the residents understand the process, understand how calculations are made, and understand the underlying trends. Apparently, that was an area of weakness 5 years ago that we want to overcome and avoid.
Thank you. I see hands raised in this order. Councilmember Brian Meeks, followed by Councilmember David Hooverman, and then Councilmember John Kides. Brian?
Yeah, thank you, and thank God we're not using Tyler anymore for this. But didn't we use Vision in 2013?
Correct.
Okay, great company. Definitely where we should be. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but on the commercial reval vote that comes after this one, how do we reevaluate commercial properties that are still under adjudication from Tyler's botched valuation just 4 years ago? And maybe I'm off on this, but I thought I heard that we still haven't cleared up all these cases.
Can you hold off, because Patrick and Vision is being awarded the contract only for residential. We have another firm present with us. They're going to talk about the commercial side. So if you could hold
Okay.
that question until we introduce.
Thanks. That's my oversight. I'm sorry. Thank
No
you.
problem.
Councilmember Hooverman.
I'm all set.
Thank you. I was just curious how many respondents there were on this RFP and where this company falls in their estimate.
So there were a total, I'm sorry, Henry, did you want to go?
I wanted to understand, when you say their estimate, are you talking about fees?
Their fees, their proposal, it's some not to exceed 900,000.
Okay, I'd like to address this if I might.
Certainly.
There were 4 respondents. Bill, with his vast experience, decades of experience, said, you have to have firms that have the personnel and the boots on the ground that can handle a large reval the size of Norwalk. There are people who theoretically talk a good game, but they can't get it all done. And we ended up selecting 2 firms for interviews after the submission of the written RFPs. And those 2 firms were selected, one for commercial and one for residential. After we selected the firms, I called each of the firms. And my conversation was something like, we love you, but your price has to be lower based on what we've seen from all 4 firms. And both firms accommodated our request to reduce their initial fee proposals.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Kides.
Yes, thanks. Were any council members involved in the RFP process?
No, sir.
I believe from the backup material, it was the tax assessor, the assistant tax assessor.
The purchasing director and the CFO.
Right, correct.
Interesting. I don't know. I just personally been involved with the last 2 revals, and there was always council involvement. Okay, I guess we missed that one. And from that experience, I learned that the last time around, and cost was a part of the conversation, obviously, when we were going through the RFP process, and certain companies were doing site visits and, having those boots on the ground. And I believe the company we actually chose were using the information, aerial views. I forget the exact term for it, but it wasn't like we have folks from the reval company going door to door and knocking on doors and asking to come in like they've done in the past. And like I said, we guess the reason we went with the company we went with the last time around because of the cost being so much significantly lower than other companies. So I guess my question is, are we doing that this time around? Are we using information that's been gathered? I forget like the term, like I said, the system that we're using, but basically aerial views that City Hall has, or we pay a service for, or are we going and visiting these properties and asking to go inside or getting eyes on?
So again, Counselor, the requirement is that we revalue every 5 years. The 2018 revaluation was not a full inspection. I don't know what was actually done. So you're talking about using street level photography and aerial images to make determinations as to whether or not the properties met the information that the city had on its systems. That has been done. That is not what we're doing this time around. This is a boots on the ground situation because it's our 10-year cycle.
I guess I'm just curious. I mean, what's the reason behind that? I mean, did it not give us the information, the specifics? Do we feel like we were losing out on, certain information by not visiting these properties versus the aerial views and the other information? Is there a reason to it? Just curious.
So every 10 years, we are required to put boots on the ground and do physical inspections by state law.
So it's it's a revaluation every 5 years, but every 10 years is a mandated physical inspection of all the properties.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's a state statute, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments related to this? Yes, Councilmember Nora Najelski-Eichner.
Thank you, Chair. And you may be planning to speak to this into the introduction to the commercial vendor, but could you just articulate for us why the decision was made to split the residential and commercial, and what the benefit to the city is of doing that?
So in the past, again, my experience in the industry is longer than I'd like to admit. I have seen, so we split up the RFP into 3 parts: the residential inspections, the residential valuation, and the commercial portion of the property of the properties, which again, I will call income producing properties, because some people consider apartment buildings residential, they're commercial. So the split up was because that's how I have done it in the past, and I've gotten better results from doing it that way. So that's why we did it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of this authorization show by a raise of hand or verbal aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed have the same right. It looks to be unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 12, which reads as follows: authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into a contract with Safe Ground Analytics, Inc. for a revaluation of commercial properties in the amount not to exceed $160,000. Account noted, tax assessor reval, other professional services. Do we have a motion on this item? Councilmember Jen McMurray, thank you. Bill Ford, over to you, and I think John Valenti from Safeguard Analytics.
Safe ground.
Thank you,
Safe
Chairman.
ground.
Safe ground, yeah,
Safe Ground, I'm sorry.
it's okay.
So the first part of the memo is the same: requirements 5 years, 10 years, et cetera, et cetera. I'll turn it over to John for a little background on himself and the company.
All right, thank you, Bill, and thank you, Chairman Burnett. So I've been working in the field for about 40 years, doing reassessments predominantly in Connecticut. We're a locally based company, although I live in Northampton, Mass. Most of our staff is from Connecticut. And we've got a great deal of commercial experience. We've done complicated cities like Burlington, Vermont, Portland, Maine, and we just finished Hartford, Connecticut last year. And we've done a number of cities over and over again. And we have worked in Norwalk supporting all the commercial valuations since the last reval. I've been helping the corporate counsel defend and do pretrial work here in Norwalk. In addition, I was instrumental in working on the valuation of the new mall. So Safe Ground has been around for a while here in Norwalk and has certainly enjoyed working with Norwalk. And if you think of our company, we really focus on something that Patrick mentioned earlier, and I think Bill did too, that we're really looking for cooperation here, communication and collaboration. And Vision and I will be collaborating on the valuation of all the properties here in Norwalk. And our staffs will be cooperating with the assessor. So it's going to be a collaborative effort, and there will be a strong push for communication with taxpayers, both at the hearing level as well as preliminary information before notices go out and well throughout the entire project. And one thing I've talked about over the years with my staff is it's okay that you know how to value a property, but you have to be able to explain it to somebody. And we really pride ourselves in being able to do that. So we spend time with people at hearings, we spend time with people across the counter, and somebody may disagree with me and not agree with the value, which is fine, but at least they understand what I'm saying and I can explain it to them. And I've had people walk away from meetings with me and say, I don't really agree with what the number, but I accept it because you've explained it. And I think that's a focus we'd like to make here in Norwalk. Thank you.
I would just add, I have very limited knowledge of assessment, and I'm learning every day from Bill and external advisors. And we had a 6-month gap when we had no assessor and no deputy assessor before Bill Ford was hired. And we used assessor from Westport and other staff to help us get through the assessment season. And John Valenti's name came up repeatedly, and I would say he's considered by the professionals as one of the deans of commercial valuation and complex properties. And so given the fact that he's worked with our city over the last 5 years with all the challenges, legal challenges we've had, and we want to get that expertise, we want to get it right, and we want to communicate it. That's why, as part of the RFP, we split off the commercial, and we're recommending Safe Ground Analytics.
Henry, could you address, similar to the residential question, how many responses to the RFP did we receive?
The RFP was a joint RFP. We did not separate it like you have on 2 motions.
Oh, I
The
see.
RFP was for a revaluation. As Bill laid out, it was 3 components. Getting the, doing the residential valuations, and then an evaluation of the assessment, calculating the assessments, and then the commercial. So every firm gave bids on those 3 components. And as Bill said, based on his experience, you can slice and dice to get best of breed. And that's what we felt we did.
Thank you. Councilmember Brian Meeks.
Muted.
Yeah, my question is, how do you deal with, I think there's a lot of cases that haven't been adjudicated from an appeals from 2018. How do you deal with that when you're going into a new cycle? I'm just curious.
So, Counselor, when I started working for the city of Norwalk, we had 435 cases the day I started. Through the work of the law department and myself, consultants like John Valenti, some of our appraisers, we have that number down below 85 now. I believe it's 79. This is one of those things where it changes from dismissals, withdrawals, but we're below that number now. I believe around 79 is the right number. And I anticipate being done with all of them prior to the next revaluation.
Okay,
We've
thanks.
settled over 300 in under 2 years
Okay,
during
my
the pandemic.
second question is more of a personal nature, but the commercial property I lease went up 250% on the last reval, and the landlord decided not to appeal, and that's fine. Maybe we were underwater for years and they just let it go. But like, are there any thresholds or ranges? Like, where do you draw the line on raising something that's beyond ridiculousness? Like,
So
again, like
by
a
state law,
250% increase.
Let me state that in Worcester, Massachusetts, where I worked previously, I had a reval where I took the hospital, a for-profit hospital, up. It was, I think, 2,200%. We're talking in the millions also.
Don't come look at my place again.
So there is no limit. You are required to maintain the values at 100%. So as of the valuation date, the market value is deemed to be 100%, and we apply 70% of that to get to the assessed value. That being said, my review of the two valuations, the revaluation of 2013, I will say that due to the economic situations at the time, they were very conservative. And the 2018 was a little more aggressive. So that's why you had a number of properties like you're talking about that saw these increases. But the values were within statistical parameters and acceptable values. That's probably why your landlord did not file for an abatement.
I would also add, excuse me, I would just also add, the cases are one by one. And I wouldn't want to characterize the whole revaluation. There are times when it's adjudicated, and it's adjudicated in our favor. Sometimes it goes another way. Sometimes both parties settle. So the reality is we have cases outstanding. We don't want to comment too much about the prior reval. As Bill noted, he's gone through about 350 cases already. And he's worked in partnership with our corporate counsel. So we settle when we feel it's appropriate. When we don't feel the settlement is appropriate, we take it to court. We're happy to stand and defend our valuation. And again, this is the tail end of that 5-year process. We try to learn our lessons, get the valuations as close to right as we can when we do the reval in 2023. There are always going to be people that challenge the valuations and assessments. But one of the things that was specified in the RFP is making sure we have detailed notations. When boots on the ground are making decisions about what is the value, why is the value what it is, does it have a water view, does it have an addition, et cetera, that those go into the notes so that if there are questions down the road, we are prepared to defend our valuations. And again, there was a unique anomaly over the last 10 years because of the recession of 2013, after the recession where the values went down. 2018, maybe they were more aggressive. Maybe 2023 will be back to a normal baseline. And Mr. Ford and his team of outside advisors are going to work very hard to get the values right and to communicate to everyone.
Okay, thanks, Bill, and thanks, Henry, and good luck, John, assuming you get this vote, which I think you will.
Thank you, Mr. Meek.
Thank you.
Do we have any additional questions or comments relating to this authorization? Okay, hearing, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of this authorization show by a raise of hand or verbal.
Aye.
All those opposed have the same right. Any abstentions? I think, was that a verbal aye from John Kides? Was that verbal?
Yes, it was.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. So it's unanimous. So we will move both of these items, 11 and 12, to the full council next week on Tuesday, September 13th for full council and final approval.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Moving on to the final item of the evening, which reads as follows: authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into a contract with Quality Data Services, Inc. for a one-year managed cloud service in an amount not to exceed $22,500, account noted. Do we have a motion on this item? Councilmember Jen McMurray, thank you. And we have Bill Ford talk about this along with Joyce Liu, our IT director. Maybe we'll start, Joyce, with you on this IT request.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So this item for the managed host service is additional on the approved, Common Council approved quality data services for the assessor collector tax management software. We have join me is Brian Riley, the IT manager from QDS side. So we are here to answer any question. So QDS basically is a partner with Novus Insight Inc. And this is their preferred vendor to doing their cloud hosting. Novus have a true data center located in Massachusetts at East Hartford, Connecticut. And they also have a disaster recovery center in Florida. And so in the last page of the agenda, you will see their quick memo regarding what kind of service they're going to provide. So upon the approval by the Common Council, we are going to get into a draft of the service level agreement with more detail. And this server is basically shared. It's like exclusive for City of Newark, so it's not with other tenants on the server. So from cybersecurity point of view, we will not have a data breach from along with other tenant on the server. So the price a little bit pricey on the side, but then again, all the cloud service that we had with other vendor, we are all share with other, on the server with other tenant. So yeah, so we are here to answer any question you guys you have.
Could I make a comment, please? As usual.
Yes.
Thank you. As usual, my staff know more than I do. Bill knows assessment much better and Joyce knows IT much better. But I have been involved in other IT situations. And it's somewhat dangerous to have the software with one vendor and the hosting environment somewhere else. So when something goes wrong, I'm going to use this visual, both sides point to the other person. Okay? It's their fault. It's their fault. And just trying to rectify problems becomes an issue. Secondarily, there's also an issue about hosting. We host quite a number of software packages on our own, but we have limitations. And this is a critical package to make sure that the assessment data is accurate and timely so that it can be handed off to the tax collector and bills can be rendered accurately and timely twice a year. So a determination was made, Bill and Joyce and I, where we looked at requiring the QDS data and making a determination, let's have QDS enter into a host environment so that QDS is responsible for the software working. I don't care whether it's the host issue or the software issue. If we have a problem, they address it, they fix it. So that was another reason why we needed this contract for the hosting services.
Before we go to questions, I see Brian Riley from QDS has his hand raised. Brian, you might want to add to the discussion.
Yeah, how are you doing? I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Yeah, I did want just to reiterate that we are going to be your one vendor to call for tax and assessment. You don't have to worry about dealing with the vendor that handles the actual data center. We will take care of that on your behalf. So everything will just filter through us. And I again, I just wanted to reiterate that. I wasn't sure where that was going. So, but if there's any other questions, please feel free.
We do have one hand raised. Councilman Brian Meeks has a question or comment. Oh, you're muted, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Whether or not you need 20 seat licenses, that's up to you guys, but I will just say for the board and everyone involved, this is actually a great price. It's $10,000 cheaper than what Amazon Web Services would charge. So it just matters, like, I mean, 20 seat licenses concurrent, like, do we have that many people using the system? And that's fine if we do. I don't understand what we're using it for so much. Thanks. That's it.
Okay, yeah. So Brian, we do have 17 users for combining with assessor collector. The extra 3 is just for the IT personnel to access the server in case we need to grab data for dashboard or for any of the reporting purpose.
Correct. Also, another thing to point out, when it comes to purchasing software as a service through Microsoft, I don't want to make it sound strange, but there is what we call the magic number. And that is that once you hit the magic number, which you guys amazingly are, your 17 users, it becomes a wash, whether you go to a per named user license or to the per core license of SQL. Now, all of that basically just means that once you go over that 17 users, you go to 18, you go to 19, you go to 20, you're no longer required to purchase additional licenses as you are paying for the server cores instead of the users. So I did want to point that out. Again, 17 seems to be the magic number. 16, apparently, it's cheaper to go the other way with the per named user. I hope that clears things up.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't have anything else. That's great to hear.
Okay, great.
Could you share with us, Brian, just the level of security? You know, cybersecurity is always at the top of the list when we talk about data. What protocols do you have in place to give us a comfort level as it relates to security of the data?
Well, it's actually all of the security is provided by Novus Data, which happen to be a preferred vendor for the state of Connecticut and are already hosting the state of Connecticut items such as things for Hartford Library, police departments, etc. They work with the CEN, which is the Connecticut Education Network, and they assist them when it comes to setting up their hosting for these municipalities, where they go ahead and they set up initiating private circuits through CEN to go from municipality to to the hosted server. Now, in terms of what they are qualified for, I believe there is a sheet already that has all of the the SOX compliancy, the whatever else they're compliant for, but basically just everything in order for them to be a state of Connecticut compliant provider. Yeah, and I'm more handling the applications and data, but what I can do, if you'd like, if we don't already have that provision to you, is I'm sure we can get you a little bulleted list for that stuff.
Great, thank you.
I would add, and I want to give Joyce a lot of credit on this. Over the last 18 to 24 months, she has collaborated both with Sharon Connors, our purchasing director, and Darren Callahan, who reviews, prepares, and negotiates contracts. And the system that we have implemented is that in RFPs, when we start talking with potential vendors to the city, there's a questionnaire they have to fill out about cybersecurity. It is reviewed by Joyce and her IT team. Putting it into the simplistic explanation that I get, bidders fall into three categories. Green light, they're doing everything great. We would let them inside our security wall, our firewalls. Yellow, a little bit cautious. We can work with them, but maybe it's for narrower purposes, and maybe they're outside that firewall most of the time. Red light says they're not up to snuff. We will not choose them as a vendor. That's what we do during the purchasing and specs. Afterwards, so we go through finance, we go through the council, the mayor is given authorization to negotiate a contract. We at the department level work with Darren on fashioning a contract that incorporates all those issues. And they have requirements they have to meet. For example, if God forbid they have a breach, they have to inform us, they have to tell us. There are negative consequences if they lose their certifications. So when we go and recommend a firm, cybersecurity is part of the whole process. Joyce, maybe you want to add a little bit more on this specific case?
Yes, what Henry said is right. So we really take cybersecurity very seriously. So start one from the RFP process, we evaluate every vendor. So if, like Henry said, green light, yellow or red, we just give us honest recommendation during the RFP process. So that's one of the very important indicator that which vendor we are choosing, it's part of the contribution factor. Right. So with QDS, then while we have a draft our service level agreement, we will have the Novus Insight Inc. to fill out the IT questionnaire. And so this will be part of the contract and sales agreement with them.
Thank you for that. Councilmember David Hoovman and Councilmember Brian Meeks.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a question. This is just the server. What are we housing on this server? Is there a different application that's being housed on this particular hosted server?
Database.
Yeah, would you like me to answer that, or it's up to you guys? Yes, it's actually the two applications. There is two quality data service apps. One of them is the Tax 5 app, and the other one is the Assessor 5 application, both of which run off of a SQL engine in the background. That is a SQL 2019 engine, and that is hosted on that server, which, as mentioned before, there's a lot of safeguards built into that database. So it's a client software on a desktop that connects to the database on that server.
And this vote, what we're voting on is just the server right now, not that. Is that an additional cost?
The other portion of it, the council had already approved. What happened is we were still working on the hosting portion of it, and we decided to go with QDS for the hosting portion. The assessor and collection portion of it was already approved by council a month or two ago.
You might recall that 2 council meetings ago, we approved a 1-year contract for quality data services.
Okay, that's what
Yeah.
this is hosting.
Right. So
Okay,
this is in addition to what we've already approved 2 council meetings ago.
Thank you.
Councilmember Meeks.
I'm sorry, I'm just happy with the direction going into the cloud. I just want to encourage finance and IT to continue to look for these opportunities. I've seen this not too recently. By the time you get through our BS of the procurement process, by the time that server hits the loading dock, it's obsolete. And, we're paying for something at a valuation of 2 years ago that's worth nothing today. And the cloud, we're just too big and bulky. We can't compete, and we just need to go to the cloud with everything. And it's going to be more secure than anything you guys can ever do down there. And that's, you know, notwithstanding your expertise, but it's just a fact. You're leveraging thousands and millions of man hours of expertise managing these things instead of trying to reinvent it at 125. So please keep up the good work there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council member Nora Najelski-Eichner. Nora, you're muted.
Apologies, sorry. So this is presumably something that's intended to go forward for more than 1 year. What is the process for renewals? What is the process if we do, you know, for some reason need to terminate this? You know, I assume there's a process put in place for getting our data back. But just again, you know, since this is clearly there was some back and forth about the sort of length of this contract. Can you speak to that, you know, Henry or Bill, what the plan is going forward?
I'll speak to that. You're right. This is a critical piece of software, and we don't migrate lightly for a 1-year contract. We expect this to be a long-term relationship with QDS. Because of circumstances and budget, we've entered into a 1-year agreement for the software and for the hosting, subject to your approval and the council's approval. What our expectation is that we'll use this software, and before the 1-year anniversary, we will come back for a long-term contract and we'll budget appropriately at that time. But it does give us an opportunity to work with this software, make sure it accommodates everything that we need, that we're happy with them, both with the software, the customer service support, the hosting. And then 6 to 8 months from now, I would expect during the budget process, we'll put in budget items to extend the contract and we'll go from there.
Great, thank you. That makes sense.
You're welcome.
Okay, do we have any other comments or questions on this item? Hearing, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of this authorization show by a raise of hand or verbal.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed have the same right. I don't see any. So the motion is unanimous, approved. So we will move this item to the full council at the next council meeting on Tuesday, September 13th for final approval.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Great.
you so much.
Thank you. So we're now at item 14, which is a motion to adjourn. Nora, Councilperson Nora Najelski-Eichner, thank you. All those in favor? It's unanimous. So we are adjourned. Thank you for your time and efforts. And
Thanks, Greg.
have a great, thank you. Have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Have
Bye.
Have a good
you all.
night.